Jeff, thank you for doing this.
Of course.
On Twitter, I saw that you mentioned PTSD and that you've gone through this, and I have also gone through PTSD, and it's one of the most difficult things to understand if you haven't lived it. Like, I could not have imagined what it really feels like since I've gone through it. So I wanted people to hear about this from us firsthand, what it feels like, so that we can help others understand that they're not alone, and also the people supporting them understand what these people are going through. So I hope that you would be able to describe what it actually feels like. Like, what did it feel like to you to go through PTSD? What's the world like?
Wow, it's quite a question. PTSD. Wow. Okay, so it's you live in fear. And I'm only going to speak from my experience. Obviously, I cannot speak for other survivors. But you live in fear. That was my experience. That a couple of things happen in PTSD. It's a chemical reaction in your brain, in the midbrain, the lizard brain that people call it, where the amygdala is, and so there's obviously that chemical aspect to it. Then there's also obviously the emotional trauma aspect to it as well. So let's divide those. I like to divide these things a little bit. As far as the amygdala, I've learned so much about these things that your prey brain, as opposed to the predator, lights up, right? And it lights up in any circumstance. I thought originally, like everybody else did, that PTSD was specifically for veterans, right? And like many other people now, I know this, that they think the same thing. So there's so many problems with PTSD, but let's just address the chemical ones, the brain. So yeah, so you go into a trigger attack and your brain fires off a billion neurons. I'm going to keep walking, so excuse me. The brain fires off a billion neurons, right? And you cannot stop them. That is an important point, because what I have found is that most people don't understand PTSD, and specifically because when the brain starts going crazy, right? When you're in that fight or flight mode, which is what it is, you can't control those things, I found, right? You start going into panic mode. Everything's panic. You're looking around your shoulder. Boom, 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 boom. And you cannot control it because it is your midbrain working. Same thing that regulates your breathing. Same thing that regulates, you can't stop it. And what I've found is, specifically when it comes to that area, that people don't understand it. It's interesting. They're terrified of you, my experience at least, because when you're in a panic attack, they tell you things like, slow down, calm down, which is the worst thing you can tell anybody, because you can't, right? You understand this. Most people don't. I mean, unfortunately, it takes survivors really to understand this. And what ends up happening, again, I have this all the time. I end up losing friends as a result. That's the part about PTSD. And I'm glad you understand this, because it just hit me about kind of recently, because I don't begrudge them for walking away. That's the hardest part. It's like, I was going to cry right now. I love them all. I really do. All the friends of mine that have been with me. But unfortunately, I have to let them go, because I understand it. If I was them, I might do the same thing, right? Yeah. And that's so lonely. It's the loneliness of PTSD that kills you. And maybe I'm getting off the chemical track and going on the emotional, but it's destructive. That's the biggest problem with PTSD, or one of them. The disease destroys everything. You understand this. But the hardest thing is, you need to get through this shit with people. You can't sometimes, because they won't talk to you because they're afraid of you. Yeah. And this is my biggest thing. For as long as I live, I have one mission in life. I swear to God, I'm building my entire career out of it by being a therapist. One mission, and that is to educate about PTSD. I also have another mission, addiction. I also have another one about all these wonderful things I'm realizing now. But the biggest thing I will do the day I die, the day I fucking die, will be to educate people on this terrible disease. Because the problem is, people understand depression. It's good, not a problem. It's great. People understand a little more and more these days. We're getting there. We're getting there. There's a million advertisements on television to not cure, but to help depression with pills, right?
Yeah.
I don't see any for mania.
Mm.
I don't see any for PTSD, right? We
Yeah.
don't understand it, and therefore we are afraid of it. The thing that drives me crazy too is that people moralize it, meaning you should calm down. It's in your control. Therefore, the implication being you're a bad person for not doing it. Now think about this. You're moralizing a disease. And think about this. We did this in the 80s, America especially. When AIDS came around, we moralized it, right? This is your fault because you shot up drugs. This is your fault because you're gay. We're doing the same shit that we did back in the 80s with PTSD, right? Because we don't understand it. Because guys like me who thought it was a veteran thing.
Yeah.
Even after the suicide, I didn't really fully understand it was PTSD because nobody understands PTSD, right? And therefore, it's an endless cycle. It's a loop of white noise, terrible white noise that is simply, I have PTSD. The one thing that I can do to reach, the one thing that I know how to do to get out of it is to talk to another human being. But the big universal gag with this whole thing is you can't sometimes.
Yeah, it's hard because it's almost like it's not you anymore who's there. It's like you're trapped, and and you do get emotional, and then I definitely felt every time I got emotional, I felt guilty, because you see the reaction of other people because they don't know what to do anymore with you, and it's very isolating, the disease, but it also shocks yourself so much because, like, for me, the way that I describe it to people now, have you seen Stranger Things? You know that
Yes.
yes.
Lie down.
Yeah, that upside down world that they go into, that's how I describe it, because like I remember the first 6 weeks I could not get out of my house, and then the first day that I tried to step out of my house, the sky was blue in reality, but when I stepped out, it felt like it was gray, and it felt like impeding doom, and your reality just becomes totally different. And how can you explain that to a person?
Can't. You know what's interesting? There's this. First of all, I communicate with survivors very well, and you are one as well, obviously. And I want to surround myself with survivors for the rest of my life, to be honest with you, or artists or people that have gone through emotional upheavals almost, because it makes for warriors.
Yeah.
Right. I'm really focused on this concept of being a warrior. A friend of mine pointed it out about 7 months ago, and it kicked everything off because I thought about it. And I'm like, wait a second. Anybody who's a fucking survivor was a warrior, right? Because when you're a warrior, then you take hits to the body, but you keep moving, right?
Yes.
You adapt or you die.
Yeah.
And survivors who are alive, by definition, are fighters, right?
Yes.
Bigger warriors than anybody I know, which is why I want to surround myself with those people, because we see things differently. We see things with empathy. We see things with compassion. We see a 30,000-foot view of the world that no one else does. It's like being in a secret club, a real warrior club. Like I compare us to Shogun warriors. I compare us to Spartans. I compare us all to true warriors throughout history. And get this is interesting. Are you familiar with Joseph Campbell and the theories of the myth of the? So get this. Great man, writer back in the, I don't remember, the 20s, I think, who wrote this. His concept is a hero's journey. Okay, and it's all throughout literature, right? Like the hero's journey basically is there's a problem and a guy comes into town and saves the world, right? But this is fascinating. The hero's journey, first of all, is not linear. I've realized that, right? I have realized that because it is zigs and it zags. People think it's linear. It's not fucking linear. You know this. PTSD recovery, zigs and zags, right? But you are doing what the hero's journey actually is. It's fascinating. The end of the hero's journey actually is that, look, the hero, here's a Yeti up in the mountains, right? So the hero comes in and says, I'll save the day. He goes and he kills the Yeti. But the hero's journey did not end until he goes back to the town and explains exactly. Oh, okay, that guy just quoted Princess Bride. That was kind of rad. That was interesting. Swear to God, that was great. Anyway, so when you go back to the town and you then tell them how to kill the demon, that's the end of the journey, right? And you're because you're passing it on. And I thought that was so fascinating that the end of the hero's journey is not killing the Yeti at the top of the mountain. It's going back to the town to say, here's what happened and here's how to avoid the next Yeti. And he goes on to the next, and then he kills another Yeti, and then he explains how to kill the Yeti. That's what you're doing. You're telling people how to kill the Yeti.
Yes. Yeah, because we have to, right? Like I'm a little bit fed up in a way with the way society is going, because it's so much based on fear and us having to hide our true self and putting these masks on. And honestly, I don't see the use for it anymore. You know, it's like enough with it already. Like I could go into politics and stuff, but I won't think of that now. But it's just, we're all human beings. We're all different. We all have differences in our journey. We all have similarities in our journey. So why not start openly talking about everything and understanding how we're different, understanding how we're alike, so that we achieve greatness together, you know?
Absolutely. But look, I believe in one thing. I believe in the possibility of humanity.
Yeah.
Right? And I see it all the time. Like I see these little bits of God everywhere, right? Like helping a woman open a door, or buying somebody a coffee, or whatever. Those are the moments of God, right? And the more that I can generate those things, the mind of enlightenment through my Bodhisattva warrior training, that's how you do it. You generate the mind of enlightenment. And when you do, here's something I do that's kind of fun. I'm gonna do a little game with you, all right? So I've been doing this for about the last 2 months or so. Pretend you're behind a counter at a Starbucks or a coffee house, okay? And I do this specifically with people behind counters. It's fun, little game I like to play. So pretend you and I just had an interaction. You gave me some money, whatever, right? And I only do this with people that I think can get it, and it works. So I'll say, hey, random person, you want to hear the 3 rules of the universe that I just came up with a couple of weeks ago?
Sure.
I want you to tear them apart. This is exactly what I do. I want you to tear them apart if you can. I could be wrong. I could be right. Here we go. Don't be a dick. Be grateful and help the next person. Okay? What do you think of that, random person?
I think that makes complete sense.
Awesome. That's what I want you to do, random person. I want you to tell me those things right back to me. Do you remember?
So don't be a dick.
And?
Then the last one was help the next person.
Be grateful.
Be grateful, yes. And then help
And?
the next person.
Great. Do it one more time.
So don't be a dick. Be grateful and help the next person.
Then here's what I want you to do. And I do this. Now here's what I want you to do, random person. I want you to go tell 2 other people that by tomorrow. But I want you to tell them to tell 2 other people by tomorrow. Now, what's interesting, what happens? Yeah, that's exactly what happens. It's so much fun because I'm generating the mind of enlightenment, specifically at one point in the conversation. It's great because the second I say, tell other people to tell other people, everybody's eyes, I've done it like 25 times in the last like 2 months or so. It's like a game I play, right? Because the eyes light up the second they understand to pass it on, right? Because, oh my God, what a great idea. I will. I even went to a Starbucks a couple of nights ago. I told the woman behind the Starbucks, like 4 days before that, she comes in, I'm like, hey, good to see you again. She goes, I told my husband about that. And even her coworkers who were there, she's like, you got to do it with the coworkers. You got to do it with them.
Yeah.
I did it in like I did it in front of like 4 employees at like a Best Buy, like a computer store.
Yeah.
And they all did it. And they all, apparently they did it. They passed on the word, right?
Yeah. And that's how you change the world, right? It really works. It's that simple.
And here's the best part. I love this. When people ask me my name, I always say, nope, doesn't matter. I'm out. Goodbye. Right?
Yeah.
It's not about me.
No, it's not. It's about us as human beings, and a name is just a part of that. It doesn't matter, you know.
That's exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the thing. Like, I want to generate the mind of enlightenment with these 3 things that I think are pretty fucking dead on.
Yeah. So
And that's the thing. And it's, again, going back to PTSD, look, I would have never had these understandings had it not been for PTSD, right?
yeah.
I'm grateful. I'm weird. It's cool we're doing all this on Thanksgiving because I'm grateful for the PTSD in some crazy way, right? Like,
Yeah. Yes.
it still affects me. I'm currently in a situation where I was really challenged, actually, where I was living with this terrible living situation where there was a dog that was attacking me nonstop over the last 7 months. It's a long story, but I have been able to even overcome certain triggers. It was a giant trigger for me. There's a lot of triggers. It's the problem with PTSD too, is you don't know where they're going to come from.
Yeah.
Right. I was having a conversation with my mother who doesn't understand the disease at all. And she said, well, the only way you can get triggered is if it's the exact trigger. Like, you know, when a gun goes off, if you're a veteran. I'm like, no, 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 no. People think that way, right? People
Yeah.
think that way. And the education for PTSD is so bad,
Yeah.
which is, again, exactly what will generate the mind of enlightenment by, I'm going to do all I can. Look, I think I'm going to get a big microphone pretty soon through being a therapist, right? I want to help people, for God's sakes. Like, I was in the music business for 20 years and it was fun, you know, and like it fed my soul sometimes when I was working with great bands like Regina Spektor or Neil Young or Mike Hem or anything. Like, it fed me, right? But the music turned. It's not my thing, right? I don't get it. I'm old, whatever. But there's that passion that lacks for me, right? And I'm now chasing another passion, which is a true passion of mine. I didn't know it was until, again, I'm grateful for the suicide because it taught me now how to give and what that actually means in my life. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do.
And if I can make some bread off it, I'm good.
Yes, but as long as you can do good, you know, that's what ultimately matters. That's what the real reward is. You get from it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The look you get out of someone's eyes when you're helping them is worth everything.
Yeah, yeah, and it's so I was gonna say it's so simple to help someone, you know, just by listening, but actually listening. It can make such a difference, you know, listening and not
Absolutely.
judging. It's quite amazing. Yeah.
Well, it's kind of the thing I was, you know, it's just the whole concept is just letting go, right? Like, I had to let go. This is, you know, I had to let go of my wife. I was forced to let go of my wife, right? I mean, it's not true. I was physically forced to be away from her. But it's taken me a long time to like kind of get to this place where I'm like, you're here, obviously, right? Like, I just found this out. Headline: I'm going to the My Chemical Romance reunion show. Can't wait. Guess who's going to be there? My wife,
Mm.
right? My wife's going to be there. My wife like went to all their shows. Here's a fun story. The My Kid is great. That band loved my wife so much that I remember one time going to a party that they were at, and I walked up, and the first thing out of their mouth was, "Where's Missy?" And I went, like, I'm the guy with your career. Like, I'm the guy who made you famous. Like, but that was the thing, right? Like, and I'm grateful for the suicide now because it's taught me the lessons that I know now, which are to let go of fucking everything,
Yeah.
especially yourself.
Yeah.
That does not mean, this is a very important thing. Does not mean do not take care of yourself. The thing I've also had to learn, and I'm sure you have as well, a lot of survivors know, is how to fucking take care of ourselves, right? Create boundaries. Go, hey, you can't do that to me because that's going to be a trigger. And that makes you feel uncomfortable, right? You're trying to control the situation. Nope, I'm just trying to take care of my health, folks,
Yeah.
right? Like, I was thinking about this too, with the amygdala firing and the midbrain firing. You act like you can act really weird, obviously,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And people don't understand that that's a symptom of the disease, meaning that if you have cancer, you're going to have lesions or I don't know, whatever it is, but like there's going to be some physical manifestation of a disease, right? The physical manifestation of PTSD is the amygdala firing off and you acting fucking crazy. Not crazy, but you acting, you know,
Yeah.
and no one seems to know that, right? They're like, they criticize, they moralize the symptom.
Yeah.
And you can't control the symptom, just like you cannot control another symptom of another disease. But it's
Yeah.
a disease theory, right? That's the thing. People don't understand that PTSD is a disorder, disease, whatever. It's a thing. It's an actual thing that needs to be addressed.
Yeah.
And you have to address the PTSD before you can address anything else, in my opinion, because it's all consuming. It's all consuming. And I will say this, I'm sorry if I'm talking a lot, but you and I have something in common. We are statistical anomalies,
Mm,
right?
I know.
Statistical people who have been through trauma and true PTSD, they don't come out of the good usually,
Yeah. I know.
right? PTSD are off the Richter scales.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You know, it's interesting. I will say this too. People that I really identify with are prisoners now. Through my work in alcohol, well, through my work in other areas, I have met a lot of prisoners, and they all have PTSD. It's incredible to watch, because when you're in that situation, obviously there's a lot of PTSD that comes out of these prisons, right?
Yeah.
And these guys and they're all wired for life. You touch them the wrong way, and they're like, bam, you know.
Yeah.
You behind him. I made the mistake of walking behind a convict one time, and he's like, dude, you know. And I understand it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Understand it.
But I actually never thought about that. Like I could understand the veterans a lot better now, and their reactions and what they're going through for the rest of their lives. It really opened my eyes to that. But yeah, I guess I never thought about people in prison, but it makes total sense, and even more reason then to make sure that people understand the true nature of this disease, so that people can get proper help. But
Absolutely. Absolutely. What we do to these veterans in this country, by the way, is a whole other story.
yeah,
The mental health in this country is just absolutely terrifying. Let's not forget, also in the U.S., we have really crazy insurance premiums, right? Like, our healthcare is shockingly bad, and
yeah,
especially those who have PTSD. No wonder we have a homeless problem in America,
yeah,
right? Because we don't address the issues. All we do is go, here's another place, you know, we go away. It's all we basically say. Go away, you're crazy, go away.
yeah,
And they're all have PTSD, for God's sakes. Of course they do. They're living on the streets.
yeah,
It was interesting. I read a couple of days ago that I think in America at least, the estimate is about 3 to 4% of America have PTSD. But problem with that is, you and I both know that most people don't identify as PTSD when they have it. They don't know.
yeah, yeah, that's true.
You
Um,
know, so you know that number's at least 10%. I'll bet. I've
yeah,
seen so many cases of PTSD that I didn't even. PTSD is so prevalent. It is a giant monster attacking America and the world.
yeah,
And I will fight for that monster. I will fight that fucking Yeti until I die.
yes, yeah. Well, we have to, right? I mean, this experience landed in our lap for a reason, I guess. And so it's part of that. But one thing I wanted to run past you, because you're quite since you're very fascinated also with the aspect of the brain. One of the things that I found that happened to me, and I don't know if this is something that you'll be able to relate to, but with my PTSD, especially when I did the EMDR treatment, it just all made sense. Like, it was almost like physically, I like when I did the EMDR, it took me back to neural pathways that were linked to the experience that triggered the PTSD, but the links went back further to previous traumas, and definitely previous emotions. Like, for me, there was a lot of guilt associated, because I felt like if so mine was from a train derailment, but the biggest
Oh,
trigger was that I was trying to get people to go out of the carriage, because there was a risk that the train would get hit by another train, because we were on the other tracks. So I was trying
right.
to get people to come with me, and they were all frozen. And I tried, and I had to eventually leave, and got the train guard, and he then got them to move to the other carriages. But that in itself linked to guilt from previous traumas, and that's how in my mind, it became interlinked to previous elements and it made it stronger. But with the EMDR, it almost felt like those neural pathways were being severed very quickly. And that was the thing
Wow.
that for me made a big difference. But they still don't
Wow.
really understand how that works. But to me, that experience seemed so clear that I'm pretty convinced that's what's happening. But of course, I'm not a scientist, so I don't know for sure.
Well, but you are right, though, in one respect, about the neural pathways. I've been really onto this idea of neuroplasticity.
Yes.
Right, exactly. That it's all just neural. You can teach an old dog new tricks, for God's sakes, through the neural pathways. Now, I will say this: I tried EMDR, and it actually didn't work for me. I don't think I was done the right way, quite frankly. But it's something I'd like to continue to try. It makes sense. I understand the bilateral
Yeah.
part and get everybody talking. I understand it. It didn't work for me. That's okay. I'll try it again. But the neuroplasticity thing, once I figured that out, I'm like, oh, I can rewire my brain if I want to. And I do it. I do it through gratitude. Today is Thanksgiving in America, right? I'm grateful for this conversation, for God's sakes. And when you live in a state of gratitude, then your brain just rewires. It's like just basic science, right?
Yeah.
Like I always tell people that I work with, I'll say, like, write a gratitude list every morning, right? 5 things that you're grateful for. Make them the same thing. Do them for 30 days, and your brain will be rewired or start to,
Yeah.
right? And once you can get that concept around that it's a physical ailment as well, it's also an emotional, perhaps. I'm not a doctor, but it certainly is a physical ailment. And when you can understand how to rewire your brain through neuroplasticity, then things get better. And you do things. I've learned this too. It's like a muscle, right?
Yes.
Being nice to people is a muscle that you have to work out, which is why I read rules of the universe a lot, because it makes me so happy. And it's free. And I get to make people smile, right? Again, the PTSD and the trauma has taught me to generate the mind of enlightenment. Now, I'll tell you a quick story. It's interesting. I love this one. There's a woman that was really, really instrumental in my recovery early on after the suicide. She told me this story. She was an actress. She told me this great story that she used to be in a long time ago. She was in a play. And there were 2 older women in the play who were playing grandmothers. They both were Holocaust survivors. Okay. One of them was wonderful, charming, apparently gorgeous, talked to everybody, full of love and light. The other one was really dark and very cruel to people. And they had the same experience, right? I mean, not the exact same experience, but they were in a Holocaust. I don't think they were the same camps. Anyway, my friend told me flat out, which one do you want to be? Right? Which one do you want to be? You have a choice right now. This is a moment in time that you have. That for the rest, like the next 6 years or so, or not 6 years, like for a while, you need to make this choice now, because otherwise you're not going to be good, right? And of course, I took the other. I said, yes, I want to be the happy woman, and that's what set me off on this journey, right? Because as survivors, we have 2 choices: adapt or die.
Yeah.
That's it. And that's why I say everybody that has not put a gun in their mouth every day is a survivor and a warrior.
Yeah.
Right? Because I've been on that stage. My God, I wanted to kill myself so many times after my wife died. I tried. Not only, actually, it's not true. I tried when I was a kid, though. I really had a lot of experiences with suicide. Then she kills herself. Then I got to face that. But look, it's all about gratitude at the end of the day for me now. Here's even an interesting thing. I really think I died on March 31st, 2010. I died at 7:35 p.m. when I got to the bottom of the bridge, and the policeman told me your wife has passed, right? And it took me 6.5 years to actually come out of this little coma that I've had, this PTSD coma, right? But what really hit me, it's wonderful to think this. First of all, she died on Easter Sunday. It's the day of death and resurrection, if you want to look at it that way, which I do. But I said this, I said, you can't kill me, I've already died, right? Can't kill me, I've already been dead. And what a beautiful place that is to come through, right? To understand that the worst thing that's ever going to happen to you, my friend, has already happened.
Yeah.
And therefore, that gives you a superpower. It gives you a superhero power, because you don't need to be afraid of shit except for the stuff that the amygdala tells you,
Yes.
right? The amygdala is like lions and tigers and bears. Oh my, we're going to be afraid of that. That's normal. But if you've been through a severe trauma, you know what you're made of. And therefore, not in the fear.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's a superpower. Think about it. It's like Superman didn't even have that all bad. You know what I mean? To people to go through things, and like currently I'm in a bad situation financially. I'm screwed and my life is kind of weird right now, but it doesn't matter because I have a superpower, right? I can look at that fear in the face and go, fuck you, I've done worse.
That's
And
very
I've done
true. Yeah.
And you have that superpower, right?
Yeah. It's
You
true.
really do.
Yeah.
And
It's
what a great, and like nobody thinks, no one has a superpower. It's a very small club.
yeah. No, you're right. It's so easy to see when other people like you, when I hear you talk, it's so easy to see that you have that superpower. Um, I still have to remind myself of that because
Me too.
yes, and constantly, I guess that's where the gratitude comes in because again, because we don't fit the standard pattern, and especially also in work, it can sometimes be difficult because
Correct.
you see other people, and it's always about being the best and being measured up to be the best in everything, and
Right.
when you're not um, all the time emotionally stable because of things that maybe you've been through, sometimes that gets seen as a weakness, when in fact, it's actually a real superpower on multiple levels, because I think it also helps us relate to other emotional uh, difficulties and pick it up in others so much quicker. You know, like the empathy levels are so much higher with people like us. And I believe that is also a pattern because I remember my CBT therapist saying that to me that the majority of people that suffer from PTSD, it seems to be more people who have high empathy levels that have this like naturally. And I wasn't aware.
Wow.
Yeah. So that really resonated with me when he said that. So,
Do you think, I'm sorry, can you repeat that a little more? I don't quite follow.
so I remember in the beginning with the CBT, there was a lot of emotions that I felt, and a lot of it was guilt and not understanding why, and almost feeling like compared to someone who's been in a war, I almost felt like I should not have PTSD, you know, it did not make sense. So he then explained to me that they do see statistically PTSD more with people who have high empathy levels.
Wow.
Yes, because of, so I'm assuming that that is because we have that added level of not just our own life that feels like it's in danger, but for me, a big element was trying to save other people's lives that I saw were potentially in danger. And that was one of the biggest things. So knowing that made a big difference for me also to get on that journey to get over it and not give up.
How long was that?
How what?
How long ago was that?
So for me, it was actually 2 years and a bit ago. So
Wow.
it,
Fresh. Wow.
yeah, it hasn't been that long yet, but it the first 3 months I was unable to really do anything. So unable to come out of the house. Even in the house, I could not be by myself without
Yeah.
any noise. So I had to have the radio on or something. I could not be alone
Yep.
in the house. And then it when I look back on it, like my therapist keeps saying to me, like, be proud of what you've achieved because you've pushed yourself constantly,
Yep.
and you need to be aware of how special this is and how much you've actually worked on this. And he's right, like I've never given up. Like every exercise that he gave me to do, I tried it out.
Yeah, me. Yeah,
Yes, yeah.
yeah, yeah.
And it makes a difference because yes, it is hard. And like for me, a part of it was exposure therapy and being in public and bursting out in tears and having other people look at you like you're a crazy person
Yeah.
isn't easy to do. It's really not easy to do. Even just going to the post office by myself, I
Yeah.
couldn't do, you know. So having gone through all of that and still pushing myself to keep doing it and to see those little improvements every time, and to, if something didn't work, try something else, you
You're
know.
a fucking warrior. You're a warrior, for God's sakes.
Yeah,
You're a war. It's what warriors do. Warriors get up, right?
yeah,
Warriors get put down. Warriors cry, but
yeah,
warriors get the fuck up and they do it. And God damn it, amazing for you, right?
yeah,
Because warriors know warriors. I
yeah,
swear to God, if you walked up to a Spartan warrior right now, we would not know what the hell they were saying because it was in Latin, but we would still be understood,
yeah,
right? Warriors know warriors. I believe that to be true. I will tell you this, actually. It's funny you bring up the fact that you did whatever your therapist said. An amazing thing happened about a year into it. I'm still freaking out, of course, and my brain's all crazy. And she says, you should go east somewhere and be of service. And I said, what does that mean? I don't know if you saw that, right? But I said, what does that mean? And she goes, just go be of service somewhere. I'm like, what are you talking about? Okay. Then I found out for the long kind of fun story, but there's this guy that I used to go to college, or what I'm talking about, a guy I used to go to grade school with, who's like the king of Cambodia, basically. He had like an airline and he had a telecom company and he was like the guy. Then I said, he called me up. I'm like, I'm trying to have to be of service somewhere. He's like, well, I live in Cambodia. He's like, just hang out. I'm like, nah, I need to be of service somehow. And he says, well, I donate to an orphanage across the Mekong River. Do you want to go there? I went, yeah. So I stayed there for about a week and a half, week or so. And it was the most amazing experience ever. It was in the jungles of nowhere, right? In the jungles of Cambodia across the Mekong River. And I got to hang out with these kids. Oh my God, I've never seen anything like it in my life. Most of them actually were there because the local gangs had slaughtered their families, like heads cut off in front of them, like terrible shit, right? And they're the happiest kids I've ever seen in my life. Happiest, right? They're playing in dirt, for God's sakes. They even put me up in the nice penthouse suite, which was a bed, and the rest of them were on cots and shit, right? They had rice and fish every day. They were happy as fuck, or at least were able to spread joy, right?
yeah,
And it like in my mind, I'm like, wait a second, this isn't about me, duh, right? It's about these kids, about these wonderful children. I have photos with these kids, photos. One little girl named Lily jumped into my arms every fucking morning and she saw me, right? These moments of grace is what I'm talking about. These moments of grace, right? And
yeah,
you understand grace, I think, better when you are a survivor, when you're a warrior,
yeah,
because then you start to see little things of God in the world. And then when you see it, then things get bigger, right? And you start seeing a bigger picture of God. Then all of a sudden, these little things that you didn't think were connected, connect. And
yeah,
that is the gift, right? So I've been telling people this for a long time. I've had a crazy life, right? Hang out with Mike Kim and Budokan, and Neil Young knows my name, and that's a whole other weird story. And I've had these great experiences, right? But in order for me to achieve the wisdom that I've received, I would not want anybody to go through it. You know
yeah,
what I mean?
yeah,
And like, you and I are warriors. You and I understand things that most people don't, and that's a gift. But I would never want anybody to go through that. Therefore, people like you and I, and exactly what we're doing right now, and exactly what I'm doing, is to teach people. Get this. This is an interesting little thing. After my wife died, right, I had the world coming up to me and giving support. It was beautiful. Hang on a second. Did I go? There we go. It was beautiful, right? Like Neil Young wrote me a letter, for God's sakes. It was amazing how many people. The funeral was packed. People flew in from New York, right? But then something interesting happened. Then the PTSD kicked in, and goodbye, kind of. Like a lot of friends of mine backed off, and it's understandable, right? Because they don't think that the PTSD is just as bad as the suicide. You know what I mean? Like they're separate things. So my friends, who I adore, all of whom were there for me during the suicide, they kind of weren't there during the PTSD solely because PTSD is not recognized, in my opinion. So you end up doing it alone. That's the hardest part about PTSD. You do it alone. But if you do it enough, as I have learned, then you know what you're made of. Today, I said something to myself. I've never said this before. I said, oh, I get to hang out with me today,
Yeah.
right? I get to hang out with me today. What a great thing to actually say and believe, more importantly, because you and I have been battered. We've been stabbed from the heart of hell. We've been stabbed, right? But we survived we survived that cleaving of our entire soul and body in two, right up the middle. But by surviving it, now we know what we are made of.
Yeah.
Right? And what a wonderful feeling to have. What a gift. What a beautiful present from the universe to know who you are.
Yeah.
To know what you're made of.
Yeah.
And more importantly, know what to spread, right? To spread the word.
Yeah. Yeah, because
that's what a bodhisattva does. And you are a bodhisattva. I'm calling it right now. Because you're working to generate the mind of enlightenment.
Yeah, yeah. I really do believe that, because there's more to life. You know, I know I've said this in the beginning also, but I really truly believe it's time now for people to just be themselves and appreciate the diversity and almost revel in it. You know, it's such a gift that we're all so different and so similar. We should be out there trying to collaborate and understand as
Right?
much as we can, you know, rather than fear and close borders or build walls. We shouldn't be doing that. You know,
I believe that there's two things that people operate out of. Not love and hate, but love and fear.
yeah,
Right? People hate. No. Fear. People operate out of fear.
yes,
And I operated out of fear until my wife died.
yeah,
I take it back. It was pretty recent. You know, after 6.5 years, finally coming around, I'm trying not to operate out of fear anymore. I'm trying to operate out of love.
yeah, yeah,
That's a big statement for me to make, because I always operated out of fear. But the great thing about self-realization is once you know it, right? Like once you understand the concept of the world being divided by fear and love, then you can make your choice.
yeah,
You know, there's a thing in psychology. You know, again, I'm starting my training on it, and it's true. When the only way that you can have therapy really is when you identify the problem, then fix the problem. Obviously, right? So the idea of a therapist is, like, the first couple of sessions, try and identify the problem. People don't identify the problem all the time. But when you identify the problem, then you can make a decision between hate or fear. Love and fear.
yeah,
Right? That's the concept. This is another interesting thing I love in this Zen Buddhism line thing. It's to leave them. I love this line. To leave the mind unstained in all environments.
yes,
Right? Beautiful phrase. That's the concept of nirvana, basically, is to leave your mind unstained in all environments. To understand, this is even a greater thing I love in this particular line of Buddhism. It's to, once you can look at your true self and not be moved, then you can attain real peace. And I love that concept of understanding who you truly are and then not be moved by it either way.
yeah,
Right?
yeah,
To see, God, I was a terrible person in 2006, whatever. Or even, God, what a wonderful life this is. Leave it unstained, right?
yeah,
Do not be moved by any of these things. And that is hard as hell. But again, once you understand that that is the goal, then you have a goal to go to
yeah,
leave your mind unstained in all environments. I love that concept.
yeah. It's brilliant. It's brilliant to see that passion that you have in yourself and that journey that you're on. It's really, really good. It's really powerful.
Very exciting, you know. And I will say this too, maybe in closing, but all my life I've wanted to kill myself. All my life. True story. I had a gun to my head, loaded, when I was 25 years old, and I was going back. I've never told anybody this really, but here we are. I was going back and forth with this gun, loaded gun to my head, right? 25 years old, drunk, wanted to kill myself. And I was having a conversation with a friend of mine on the phone, just like I'm having with you, quite frankly. It was really weird. And all of a sudden the gun went off right next to my head. Bam! Shot a hole in the ceiling. Missed my head by about that much. I'm not joking. Okay? I would have sheared my head off. I didn't.
Mm.
I ran away. It was a weird night, but there's other times in my life when I've come really close. That was obviously the closest.
Yeah.
But and about even after the suicide, even when things were okay in my life, I was always like, there's always an out, right? But the beauty of this whole thing is that now I got a direction in life. Now I got a purpose.
Mm.
I have a divine purpose, I think. I'm not saying I'm God, but I think I do have a divine purpose, which is to generate the mind of enlightenment, specifically as it relates to PTSD. Oh, one other fun thing was you talked about the military. It was interesting. There's a group out here, a wonderful organization in America called Wounded Warriors, and they take care of veterans. So anyway, my PTSD was so bad that I actually got invited into the Wounded Warriors camp, which is like all veterans, right? I literally had weapons grade, military grade PTSD, obviously enough for me to get involved with this group. And it was a weekend, and like we trained horses, and it was learning a lot about boundaries, and it was amazing. But I never really gave respect to the PTSD, meaning that it was always like in the back of my head, like, yeah, I got this thing. I didn't understand it. Once I respected the evil of PTSD, the true evil nature of PTSD, then I was able to start working on it.
Yeah.
Right. And in a cage. I've been thinking about this. The suicide, I got 4 cages in my mind, 4, where I put things away. PTSD cage, suicide grief cage, addiction cage, and bipolarity cage. And I've been able, hang on. Okay, here we go. I've been able to successfully do that, I think, because in my mind, there's those 4 cages. I go, suicide grief, you're going in there, you giant snarling tiger, right? And you charging rhino, you're going to go in there, depression. And when I realized that I can cage these things up in my mind, sure, they're going to try and get out. Sure, they're going to rattle the cage. And I'll just be like, shut the fuck up. You're done. I'm done with you.
Yeah.
Right? You'll always be a part of my life, but you're going to be in a fucking cage for the rest of my life. God damn it. Because guess who's the only person that can open that cage, the only person that has the key is me.
Mm.
Right? So they can do all they want. They can, scratch at the cage and rattle it and blah, 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 blah. But if I don't want to open the fucking cage, guess where they're staying? In the cage.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? And that's what it is. It's interesting. I was talking to my dad last night, and he was even like, it's cool that you can control your PTSD. And I said, that's the wrong word. Manage.
Yeah.
Right? You manage it. You never get through it. You manage it. You fucking manage it like it's a disease, which it is. People that have diabetes take insulin.
Yeah.
Right? So how do you get over trauma, PTSD, or EMDR? And, there's meditation and gratitude lists, and there's all kinds of things to do.
Yeah.
People just don't do it because they don't know about it.
Yeah.
Hence, you and I having this conversation is generating the mind of enlightenment about PTSD. You have attained a goal today. I have attained a goal today. And we will continue because we are warriors, right?
Yeah. You're right. And everyone out there who has gone through similar, because it's not just PTSD. It's all the other things that you mentioned too. There's so much around mental well-being that people need to just talk about more and more. If we can encourage that and create a safe environment in the world, then I think a lot will change.
I fervently believe that. I really do. PTSD is going to have its time in the sun in about 10 years or so, I hope, where people finally the debilitating and totally destructive nature of this disease. One last thing I'll say is, I thought about this about 2 weeks ago. You may have seen me post it, and I really believe this, which is, I don't really think I'm going to say my wife killed herself anymore. I don't think I'm going to say the word suicide because it's laden with so much morality that instead I will say that she died of complications from trauma and alcoholism and mental illness, right? When you say it that way, it takes all the morality out of it, sucks it out of the air. They died of complications of addiction. They died of complications of PTSD. They died of complications from this. Because that's all it is, right? It's like when you die of AIDS. You don't die of AIDS, you die from complications from AIDS. You die of a flu, or you die of a cold, or whatever, because your immune system shut down, right? Suicide is kind of like AIDS in that way, where we moralize it because we don't understand it, right? That's how you moralized AIDS back in the 80s, because no one fucking knew what it was, and then we decided to attach a morality to it to make sense of it, right? And we do it with suicide. We do it with all kinds of suicide. We're going to attach a morality to it. It was your choice. Fuck no, it wasn't your choice, for God's sakes. Of course it wasn't your choice. You had no idea what else to do. You did your best. I'll tell you this too. The greatest thing, best analogy about suicide I've ever heard in my life came from David Foster Wallace, a writer who unfortunately killed himself, but it was a perfect metaphor for it. He said that it's like imagine that you're standing at the bottom of a big building, and you see somebody at the top, and like in the top floor, and they're about ready to jump out, okay? And you're at the bottom going, no, 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 don't. But what you don't know is, in the scenario, there's a fire, a raging fire about ready to engulf the guy at the top floor, right? So he makes a choice, okay? And he says, I'm either going to jump and die, or I'm going to burn and die. I'd rather jump and die, right?
Yeah.
But you don't see that because of the perspective. You're down at the very bottom. You don't see the flames. So all you see is a guy jumping off, right? But when you add that contextualization to it, that the guy may have been burned alive, and they made a choice between that, and again, it's a perceived threat, but the perceived threat, I like to use this term emotional hallucination, right? Because it's kind of what it is. You think that you're feeling a certain way, but it's not based in reality, so therefore it is an emotional hallucination, just as valid as a one, right? Like, it's a big deal for me to think about that, because it's really true for me, at least. And I have to remind myself of that. Once I get wrapped up sometimes, I'm like, this is just a hallucination, just a bad ghost to scare away, tell them to fuck off, right?
Yeah.
But that's the thing. That's why people die. People die this way because they have emotional hallucinations. But once you understand that, then you retract the morality from it that's already there, right? And then you can say things like, she died of complications from mental illness, or she died of complications from addiction.
Yeah. That makes sense. Yeah.
All it fucking is, just take the bottle that we did over AIDS. We not finally, but a little bit of, we've demoralized that disease, and now it's understood that you take certain drugs and it will probably help.
Yeah.
But we don't do that in this country or anywhere. We don't talk about PTSD.
No.
So what a wonderful conversation.
Yes. Thank you very much for that, Jeff.